Franklin Elementary School. Whether you're a first-time visitor to the school this evening, the parent of a child who attends school here now, or perhaps an alumnus of Franklin yourself, we're glad you're here with us this evening to learn a little bit more about Newton's override proposal and to see one of the facilities with needs that will be addressed through this ballot question. My name is Mark Chitty. This is my 13th year as a principal in the Newton Public Schools. I'm also the proud parent of an 8th grader at Brown and a senior at Newton South High School, so I have experienced Newton Public Schools from multiple perspectives. After 11 years as the principal at Pierce, this is my second year here at Franklin, and I can tell you that this is an amazing learning community with dedicated teachers, enthusiastic and supportive families, and amazing students. Since I came to Franklin, I have met many families who talk about all that this school has meant in the formative years of their children's lives. And I have learned that the love community members hold for Franklin runs very deep. This structure has stood here since the 1930s and has been at the heart of the West Newton community through many chapters of our nation, state, and city's history. Those of you who participated in the tour earlier this evening got a look at how this facility is holding up, and in many cases failing to hold up, to the needs of learning in our present context, and whatever the inadequacies that exist for the facility in 2022, and they are many, it has been a launching point for generations of citizens who've gone on to make the world a happier and healthier place for themselves and others. It is that mission that we wish to continue for the new generations of Franklin students. This year at Franklin, we have 367 students enrolled in 18 classrooms, and we join the other Newton Public Schools in creating an engaging learning experience focusing on academic excellence, social and emotional well-being, and educational equity. Our students and families have been greatly impacted by the trials of the pandemic years and the loss of valuable instruction and opportunities to collaborate with others to develop vital social skills. To help our students make up lost ground and thrive as they prepare for middle school, we've made it a top priority at Franklin to build a multiple-tiered system of support that includes weekly meetings of grade level and interdisciplinary teams, a coaching model for strengthening instruction in literacy, math, and social emotional learning, and data-based interventions to both support and extend learning for our students. We are also joining the other Newton schools in focusing our professional learning on instruction that is culturally responsive and focused on high expectations for all students, making sure that everyone feels included, engaged, and challenged. Along with continuously strengthening our academic instruction, a key part of meeting the challenge of this present moment is providing adequate mental health support for our students, a need that has grown only stronger during the isolation of the pandemic. It is with deep appreciation that I welcome all of you here this evening. Appreciation for your time and attention to the information presented in this forum. Appreciation for your strong support for this vibrant school community at Franklin and in Newton. Appreciation for your interest in the ways Newton can continue to build school communities and school facilities that help our children become amazing citizens with a deep knowledge base, effective communication skills, and strong social emotional intelligence. I am now pleased to introduce our mayor, Ruth Ann Fuller.
Thank you, Mark. What he said, we could almost open it up for Q&A right now because you're seeing in Mark Chitty and the educators that he's lifting up here in Franklin and that are across all our schools. You're seeing such deep professionalism and caring and love for community within their walls and beyond. I do want to point out a few people. We're joined by 3 school committee members. I'm so glad Kathy Shields, Amping Shen, and Emily Prenner are with us. We have the architect from HMFH that has been working with Mark and our Commissioner of Public Buildings, Josh Morse, who's with us, to begin the process of imagining what this building could be. As Mark said, this is a fabulous school with fabulous learning going on for all 367 students. can you imagine if they have a building that's perfectly designed for the 21st century supports that Mark and his team are giving, with the adjacencies that are correct, with the floors working well for people of all types of mobilities. It will just lift up the learning and teaching that is going on so well. I want to thank the Newton IT team. So we're trying to do this in person, and help me out, Sam. If somebody wants to send in a question, what email should they be sending it to? I'll repeat that. Start sending us questions at override@newtonma.gov, and we'll feather that in with any questions that some of our in-person folks are speaking about. Tonight is primarily about the Newton Public Schools, which is fitting and good because 75% of the dollars in this override are all about students and teaching and learning. If you end up having a question on another element of it, we'll take it, but we might put it at the end with your indulgence. Let's do all the school ones first, and then I'm here till the last question is answered, so we're happy to do it. The other thing I would say is, you probably have figured this out. There's going to be 3 questions, we believe, on the ballot. One is what's called an operating override. It has the Horace Mann addition and renovation tucked into it, as well as operating support for the Newton Public Schools, as well as streets and sidewalks, parks, athletic fields, courts and playgrounds, trees, sustainability and climate resiliency, and just so you know what that means, is trying to move school buildings and municipal buildings off fossil fuels with, by the way, your old haunt, Mark, Pierce School being that, and the library being the first 2 projects that we want to tackle. It's expanding services for our largest demographic. You would think kids might be, but in fact, it's our residents who are 60 and older are both our largest demographic and our fastest growing. So that's in the operating override. Yes, that's a permanent tax increase, and it would start soon after if we vote yes. So it would start next July 1st. If you can go to the next slide, Josh. The other 2 questions, there's one on the bonding for the complete renovation of Countryside. The other is a second question for the bonding for the complete renovation of the building that we're in tonight, Franklin. Those are temporary increases for the life of the bonds, but please know the bonds are for 30 years, so it might feel like forever, but it actually does roll off. And that tax increase actually doesn't kick in immediately. We have to finish designing the schools, and then once you put the spade in the ground is when we start bonding. And we bond each school over 2 or 3 years. So it takes a while for that tax increase to actually make it to our tax bills. I want to thank Josh Morse, our building commissioner, is with us. If there's a question that our COO, Jonathan Yo, can answer, or our CFO, Maureen Lemieux, can answer, they're here. I'm going to let Kathy Smith introduce her teammates who are with her tonight. I know this sounds odd. I know the inflation that we're all facing. I know that a recession is coming our way, and it's just a question of how bad it is going to be. The pandemic anxiety, which is both financial and emotional, I think is still swirling, certainly within me and among almost everybody I know. So it couldn't be a worse time to turn to the voters and say, would you consider reaching deeper into your wallet. That said, we have been using every dollar really well, and actually to meet the expectations and the needs of our students and our residents, I am asking, if at all possible, for people to dig even deeper. With that, it is a great pleasure to welcome Kathy Smith, who is serving as our superintendent and doing so beautifully, even when she's being not just the normal types of things that a superintendent has to do, but she's all in and helping us explain why we're bringing forward an override at this time. Kathy, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Fuller. I appreciate that. And I will start with an introduction of my team. I have my assistant superintendent overseeing all of our 15 elementary schools, Aisha Farag, doing many more than just our elementary schools, and I have my assistant superintendent of our business and finance, Liam Hurley. I also, the mayor, introduced our school committee, and who did I miss?
Not a darn person, but I was supposed to have Josh talk about Countryside Franklin.
Okay.
So I'll come back.
Okay, Josh, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. So for anybody that doesn't know me, my name is Josh Morse. I'm the Public Buildings Commissioner with the city. So I have the wonderful pleasure of leading the charge with a lot of great support from everybody on the school side and the city side, and lots of volunteers throughout the parent community on our Franklin School project, our Countryside School project, and our Horace Mann School project. Our team and many folks here tonight helped us make our way through the Ainger, Zervis, and Cabot School projects. So we've got a lot of the same players coming back. And a huge, huge thank you to so many of the Franklin parents in the community that have helped us to this point, many of you right in the room tonight. So I'm going to start with the Countryside School. I know we're in Franklin, and I will speak to that as well, but just for anybody who's not familiar with the Countryside School, this is a challenging facility, a very different challenge than Franklin presents. The the Countryside School is made up of almost half modular classrooms. It sits directly adjacent to wetlands. It is well below the water table. It's plagued with chronic flooding. It's so low in the ground below the street level that we have to grind and pump sewage up. I have been the lucky person to crawl hand over elbow through sewage on many occasions down in that little bottom left-hand corner. It's a tough building. And what ended up happening was the Countryside School was built in the 50s, and there was a massive, the baby boom, of course, so they started adding modular classrooms, and they kept going right up until the 2010s. So half of the school being modular classrooms, but the school doubled in size without doubling any of the support spaces, meaning like restrooms or offices or special education. It's lacking all of those support spaces and special education spaces and student service spaces and staff support spaces that you need in 21st century learning. It's in very, very difficult condition. Those modulars are starting to quite frankly, rot away, and the vast majority of the building has well exceeded its useful life. So we submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority a statement of interest through their core grant program, and we were awarded that school. We submitted both Franklin and Countryside. The state actually selected the Countryside School. So they will be picking up 25 to 30% of the cost of that project. So that's a wonderful partnership with the state. We'll continue moving on that project as we move forward. And that's the summary. There's a lot more that I could add if folks have questions. The Franklin School, I'm going to guess most folks know it all too well, but I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. So Franklin was built in the 30s, but it had additions in the 50s as well. Franklin School, just like Countryside, had to respond to the baby boomer, just absolutely got crushed shortly after the school was built. And that's when they did the addition in the back here. So the school originally did not have a gym, and it was lacking in classrooms. So when enrollment started to spike, they built that addition, and that's back in the 30s, the gym was actually down in the basement. It was one of the few student-occupied spaces in the basement area, which is now the library, which I'll speak to in just a moment. Then in the 50s, in response to even greater population increases, the kindergarten wing was added. Many people refer to it as modular classrooms. It's not technically modular classrooms. I kind of wish it was, because it would be better construction and a friendlier environment to be in. For anybody that doesn't know the history over there, they've been flooded out many times to the point where the custodians used to keep sandbags on hand, and probably still do, just to build a temporary wall to keep the water from flooding out. We did do some stormwater improvements, which has improved that situation. Also, that space, because it was a temporary solution 70 years ago, the walls have very, very little insulation. It is extremely cold in the winter. So that obviously is problematic. The Franklin School also has some significant accessibility challenges. Derby Street is approximately 14 feet below the main level of the school, but once you get up to the main entrance, you're then met with a set of stairs or an elevator to take you to the 3 floors, but that doesn't give you access to the entire building. The building has 6 different elevation changes as you move through, and that's a product of having multiple additions over the course of the last almost 100 years. The other things you'll see in Franklin is that the school has to use a lot of hallway space for breakout and support spaces, because they simply don't have the space that they need. Classrooms are undersized. There are no breakout spaces. There's no pull-out space. There's no special education spaces. You know, Mark has done incredible work with his staff here to make the best of the situation, and they're succeeding in spite of the building, but that's not how it's supposed to work. The building is supposed to support their efforts and give them the best possible advantage to provide the best possible education. And lastly, on Franklin, I think what is extremely problematic is that as the school has expanded, they have had to use the basement areas, and the basement is extremely problematic. It was never intended to be an occupied 9-to-5 space or 7 to 3. It was designed to be bike storage and back-of-house storage and electrical rooms, and originally physical education space for days that it was rainy. Back in the 30s, you played outside unless the weather was absolutely horrible, in which case you went to the basement and you kicked the ball around. Now we use those spaces that were meant to be quasi-dungeons for educational purposes, because we have no other choice. We don't have any other space. So the library moved into a basement area. Chronic moisture issues. The after-school program moved into the space just outside the main electric room with no windows. Music and art are in sub-base areas where we were supposed to store bicycles, but we just don't have the space. So that's Franklin in a nutshell. But I think the incredible opportunity that I want to mention here at Franklin, and this is true at all our school projects, is that this is an amazing opportunity for the entire neighborhood. Whether you have children in the school or not, whether you once had children in the school, whether you once will have children in the school, this is an amazing site. We have an opportunity. The Franklin School site is approximately 5 acres. 4 acres of that is essentially open space. It's an incredible opportunity to create something really special, not only for the Franklin School, but for the entire neighborhood. Athletic fields, playgrounds, basketball courts, more trees, plantings. It can be an incredible heart of the community. And it is now, but it can be so much more. So that's Franklin. It's, I think, an incredible opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to it. We've been working on it now for almost a year. A lot of members of the community have followed us for quite some time now, and we look forward to continuing that great work with all those volunteers. So the Horace Mann School. So the Horace Mann School is an interesting one. For folks that aren't familiar, this was once the Carr School. It was the temporary swing space way back when. It was actually the Carr Elementary School. Horace Mann moved in, and we had renovated it back in 2013, 2014. The building is in really good shape. It's a swing space, though. It was intended to house schools as they waited for their new school. And as such, there are some things that are just lacking. Primarily, space. The existing building is in very good shape. The systems were all replaced. Everything was upgraded. It's fully accessible. But it's lacking a lot of those spaces that we talked about at Countryside and Franklin. So for Horace Mann, it's a little more straightforward to explain, not so straightforward to pull off. But to explain it, right here, let's see if I can get the pointer. There we go. So this is the addition. This is the base school back here. So the addition is in the rear of the school. Horace Mann genuinely just needs more space. So although we have some work to do within the building to right-size classrooms and to create some breakout spaces, the addition really is where we're going to make hay. It's a cafetorium, it's additional classrooms, it's special education spaces, student services, staff support spaces, but it's in a really easy place on the site to construct. But we desperately need it. And you can see the dots here are visual representations. These are to scale, so it gives you a sense as to how much smaller the current spaces are than what we call our guidelines. These guidelines are provided to us by the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the state, and they were developed in partnership with the Department of Education. And if you look from a national perspective, they're pretty much in line with the national standards as well. And that's it. And with that, I will turn it over to Kathy.
Josh, your knowledge is amazing and always informational. I started by introducing my staff, and one of the things I wanted to share with you is, having only been here 4 months, I have truly been blessed. I've been blessed with a very strong central administration staff, which you'll hear from this evening, a school committee who has worked tirelessly with professional development, working collaboratively, knowing that the students and the residents and the Newton community needs us to work in a fashion that best supports them, certainly coming off of a very challenging time. You see our principal, Mark Chitty, represents a wonderful group. I met them early on in early July and was amazed at the gift of having such strong leaders, again, dedicated to your students, to your families. And thank you for the tour this evening, and thank you for always being there. So let me start by saying, although I've been here 4 months, I've known you a long time. So many of you know that I was superintendent in Brockton for 6 years and actually worked in the district for 42 years, held many, many roles there. The most important role I held was to be an advocate for equitable funding for them back starting in 2014, finishing with the Student Opportunity Act. Why am I saying that this evening? The reason I'm saying that is I am looking back on the support that this community provided back with your 2013 override. And you were one of the premier communities, school districts, that I looked at to see what support you had in place for your children, your students, because that was good for all students, no matter their zip code. So I shared with our administrative staff this morning, just reminding everybody, with that investment, smaller class sizes to provide positive academic learning environments and social and emotional support, high quality, engaging full-day kindergarten program, 3 new at the time renovated and expanded elementary school buildings, expanded technology, retaining high quality, experienced and committed staff and teachers. I say that to you because many of you have seen what I have seen just this past week. You see not only our state, but our nation talking about this being a critical turning point in education. And we have decisions to make. And what I'm talking about is our students over the past 3 years have suffered greatly, a very, very challenging time for this generation of students. So when I say you're at a turning point, you are truly poised to move forward, to make sure that some of the things we're going to share with you this evening are retained, that our students have the benefit of what you did back in 2013, keeping pace and making sure that this generation does not have a loss of learning, does not have or has the opportunities for social and emotional support, mental health support, state-of-the-art technology, and certainly the buildings that the students rightly deserve. So let me take you through a couple of, I'm not sure if they're misconceptions, but I want to talk about the Newton Public Schools. And when you talk about the student-teacher ratio, so if you look at Newton on the slides, and I'm going to actually come over here, you look at, again, we're not the lowest when you talk about student-teacher ratio, and being honest, it isn't that your average class sizes are, as you see, a 10.8. That takes into account your coaches, your interventionists, your specialists. Your average class sizes at an elementary level are about at 20. Very reasonable to be able to support students during, again, challenging time and going forward. You're also, again, when you look at the student-teacher ratio, not the highest in Belmont with 15.4. And we're not necessarily the lowest at Cambridge, 8.7, and as I say, no surprise there. So Newton, again, one of the most important things, and I'll tell you a very quick story in visiting one of your schools and speaking to one of your teachers at an elementary level. And what she talked about with me as a fourth grade teacher last year, during the challenging time, having a very appropriate class size. She talked about personalized learning. She talked about getting to know every one of the students that needed to be accelerated, those students that needed the additional supports, whatever they needed for personalized learning to succeed. And honestly, I know that we don't always talk about test scores, and looking at that particular classroom, it bore out that there were success. It's no surprise to us as educators, and I'm certainly to those families out there. Next slide, please. When you look at your per pupil expenditure, what do we spend per pupil in the city of Newton? And you look at just a little bit over $23,000. Again, Cambridge at $35,000, and you see some as low as $17,000. So this is an important measurement, and the reason that I say that is, again, you're a large city. You have a commitment to supporting education. This is critical to make sure that we have instructional supplies, robust, rigorous curriculum, making sure that our teachers have what we need at every single level, to educate our students. And again, we're not the highest, we're not the lowest, we're kind of just right. And as I talk, the one thing I would like people to remember is this is not time to lose pace with where we are as a city and a school district. Next slide, please. You look at your graduation and dropout rates. Again, when you talk about how large your city is and how large almost 12,000 students in your school district, I am so impressed when I looked at a city at 95.7% graduation rate. So you, again, are graduating your students, whether they're going on to, and you'll see a slide, college, career, military, other opportunities. Very, very impressive. Next slide. And this is a slide that shows you 53.7% go to four-year private colleges. This is, again, where we do not want to lose any ground, especially during, and again, when I say we're listening to the news and we're talking about a generation, we don't want to lose this generation. We need to keep supporting, our students. And next slide. This is something that I think I have witnessed myself in being in your schools. When you look at Newton at 1.5% for outplaced students, what you have done very well, and I talked to my own team about being at the Bigelow School recently, and you have a deaf and hard of hearing classroom. And as I walked into that classroom, these are students that might have been outplaced, but they weren't. They were in a classroom taught by a general education teacher with an interpreter in the classroom with their peers. They were with their peers in a middle school, not only in a classroom for English language, a classroom for English language arts, but also all those opportunities that you have with your peers. So when you look at 1.5%, we develop in-house programs. We make sure that our students and our residents have an opportunity to stay in their neighborhoods, develop relationships with their friends, and still receive the critical support that they need to make sure that they are progressing and they are one of those graduation rates, that they are able to graduate on time. Next slide, please. The mental health referrals, and again, I'm so impressed when I came to the city because one thing that I know is as a school district, and we were tasked, not only during the pandemic, but making sure that we provided families, students with so many supports during those 3 years. And when you look at the mental health referrals, we actually have increased our staff to make sure that we have those counselors. I think your numbers at the high school for your high school counselors have a student ratio rate of 175 students. You cannot increase that. It's critical that they give those students, when you look at where students are going after high school, that they support them so they get to graduation and they're able to move on and be successful. But also the students that need to be self-regulated, that need an opportunity to deal with some of the anxiety. And this is something we saw, and I will have to tell you, after being an educator that was a special education teacher, a school adjustment counselor, I was surprised. I was surprised at getting students back in routines, having the opportunity to play nice in the sandbox. to make sure that you could sit for a 6 or 7 hour school day. All of this is critical, and when we talked about that teacher in the classroom, making sure that they know the needs of all those students, it is also critical to have that interventionist come in, that coach to work with that teacher for those students that need the additional support, and critical for those students that need, again, to be regulated, get them back into the classroom, work with the families, and provide the supports that are needed. Next slide, please. Your investment for the operating budget is an additional funding amount, as the mayor said, of $4.5 million. And again, I think we have another slide that will explain that a little further. I'm going to actually hand this over to my assistant superintendent, and this is something I just whispered to her she knows in her sleep. You will see her passion, and she'll be able to talk to you again, having been a principal in the district for many years, and now serving in this role 2 years, and I am so fortunate to have her at my side.
Thanks, Kathy. Mix it up a little bit, give you another voice to hear from. Thinking about what does this override mean for our district, and I invite you all to think about for a moment a child in your life. Maybe it is your own child, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a community member, a niece, a nephew, and think about the vision that you have. What do you want for that child? What do we owe our kids in terms of an educational experience? What's the kind of thing you want your kids to say about school every day when they come to learn? And that's what we focus on in the Newton Public Schools, right? Every meeting, everything we do is focused on the kind of experience that our kids are having that is going to give them the skills and the knowledge to be ready for their future. Not ready for the right now, that's part of it, but getting them ready for the future that they're going into. And so looking at what are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. We're thinking about what the academic program looks like and feels like for kids. That there's a strong, standards-aligned curriculum that meets every student where they are. And what we know is that in public schools today, we serve everybody. And that array of need is wide. Unlike there is a time in not so distant history where our public schools did not serve every student, where the continuum of need was smaller. And in fact, that has widened over time, and we're proud of that, to welcome all of our students, to make our schools an inclusive place for every single student. And so that we're focusing on those grade level standards, we're focusing on helping students to get the support they need, if they need it, and we're helping students to take that extra step with enrichment if they need that. I can tell you, being in classrooms over the last couple of days, seeing examples of just that, both providing the additional support and providing the enrichment that students need. Thinking about, we're committed in Newton to our community schools, our neighborhood schools. That's not true everywhere. We have 15 different schools nestled in various neighborhoods, like here at Franklin, where people are, by and large, are walking to school. That's a commitment of the Newton Public Schools. That's a decision that the city of Newton has made in support of families, neighborhoods, and students to preserve those community schools. Robust and meaningful mental health supports. Children need to be well. We need to make sure that every child has a sense of belonging, every child has a sense of connection, every child is supported to be able to develop those skills around cooperation, around managing their emotions, identifying their emotions. And the needs of mental health needs, students aren't immune from the needs that we see in our greater community. You need only to pick up the newspaper to see elements of depression, anxiety, et cetera, that have skyrocketed throughout the pandemic and that continue to persist in our communities, not just in Newton, across the country. And our kids are a part of that. And our schools are the front line of providing support for all of our kids. And finally, as I said, as we prepare children for their future, we need to be looking ahead. And technology is a part of the world they are moving into. And ensuring that our schools have modern, innovative, and readily accessible technology is our responsibility in ensuring that our kids have the tools that they need to be ready for their futures. And so, thinking about the strong, challenging, and engaging academic program of study, we think about, as Kathy said earlier, what are our class sizes like? Does it allow for the relationship between the teacher and the students? And how many people here have more than one child? All right, same. I'm going to imagine that your two children are not exactly the same and always want to do the same thing at the same time and always need the same thing at the same time. And I want you to imagine what it's like to spend days upon days upon days with a classroom full of children whose needs are all different from each other. And you are shepherding that class towards all learning those grade level standards. The class size matters. Meeting each student, every parent will tell you they want their child to be known and they want their child to be met where they are, and that is how we help students to learn and grow. Our specialist teachers, art, music, PE, we also have specialists in the area of literacy, math, a variety of interventionists who help to support our students' learning. Coordinating that progression across the district with curriculum coordinators who help to make sure that our curriculum is aligned with standards and content-based information, that they're able to help teach teachers to stay abreast of best practices. And making sure that we have a wide variety of classes, again, appealing to interest, because motivation matters. You don't want to learn things that aren't interesting to you. And the future that they're going into has a wide variety of options that weren't there necessarily when some of us were in school, right? And so that wide variety of courses and multiple pathways for students to excel and explore their interests are important. And so with this, again, reiterating the point about our neighborhood schools, thinking about, Kathy talked earlier about our in-district programming to meet the needs of our students, whereas I've worked in smaller districts, I've worked in a variety of different districts, and I'm proud to be here, seeing the ways that we commit to our students. It's important. It is a moral and ethical obligation to make sure that our students have the opportunity to attend school in their own city. These are our kids. And so making sure that we have programs that are able to, and by the way, it's not just a moral and ethical dilemma, it actually is more cost effective to do that than for our students to be tuitioned out to outside programs. We serve a variety of different students who speak more than 50 languages. We're seeing a large boom right now. I'll tell you, our enrollment in our ELL programs this year is very high. Many level 1 learners who are coming in with no English experience at all, and we're meeting them where they are, integrating students into their classes, welcoming them to our communities. It's pretty terrific. And a variety of different athletics, fine arts, and activities beyond the academic program. This is important. This is a part of what Newton has committed to with its students, and we're proud to offer our kids in this community. I think Kathy was going to take it from here. See, we're mixing it up on you. You can hear different voices here.
Thanks, Aisha. Again, looking at your commitment, and we've really covered this, but when you talk about meaningful mental health supports, when you look at the specialists, I talked about the guidance counselors, your social workers, adjustment counselors, psychologists, interventionists, programming in the school, partnerships with community health organizations. Next slide, please. And one of the things when you heard me again talk about your commitment back in 2013 to move to one-to-one devices, obviously that was accelerated as the pandemic approached. And this happened again, not just in Newton, certainly in all places. And what it did was we dedicated one-to-one device program, interactive curriculum materials, sophisticated assessment tools, digital creation tools, access to content by text, audio, video. All of these things, again, is something that we have to keep our foot really on the pedal and make sure that our kids as global citizens competing in the world that they're going to be competing in have all these opportunities. Our teachers, and I will tell you, watching teachers who, again, when you look at some of the teachers that have been in education a long time like myself, some of this new teaching with technology was a little bit scary at first, and they've done a great job in all classes, supporting each other, making sure. So I guess if there's one silver lining, and we can talk about that with the pandemic, is making sure that our kids had, you've watched kids with technology. It doesn't matter if it's the littlest preschoolers. You know, they know how to do things that they teach me how to do. So we have to make sure that we continue to provide state-of-the-art technology throughout our district. Next slide. So why the $4.5 million? Why is that needed in our operating budget? We do not have to tell anybody that when you talk about rising costs that have or will exceed our average yearly budget increase of 3.5%, which is very reasonable. And that is where you have kept pace. And when you needed to increase that, you did, with opportunities for your residents for override votes to make sure that you remained that premier district that you are to this day. When you look at the cost now of transportation, health insurance, commitment to in-district programs and out-of-district tuition rates, which we're just getting information on, which are skyrocketing. Making sure, again, continued use of one-time funds. So I hear the mayor say it all the time. The CARES Act, ESSER funding that came to schools, ESSER 1, 2, and 3, ARPA funding. If we did not have that in the cities and towns across this Commonwealth and across our nation, we would not have been able to survive or be in the position that we are in now. I believe we're in a really good position. Now, I just put this slide up here, and you're wondering why I'm saying that. I'm saying that because, again, we use this funding well, but when you look at one-time funds for technology, making sure, as I just said, state-of-the-art technology, making sure we had that one-to-one devices from the youngest students all the way up to our 12th graders and beyond. Building maintenance, you're making sure when you talk about your schools that you continue to pay attention to ventilation. We spent, well, Liam, you can tell us the cost of what you spent here in Newton, but hundreds and thousands of dollars to make sure our kids could come back to, right, millions of dollars. I listen, Mayor, when you talk about, again, you know, money that was lost during the pandemic, you know, those tax dollars, those businesses. You know, we are recovering, but it is so critical to have this support at this time for our schools when you talk about $4.5 million to allow us to keep pace, to allow you to be the premier district I love to call you, because that's what I called you well before I came here as your superintendent. And you're looked up to throughout the Commonwealth and I'm sure beyond. And we need to provide that for not only your children that came before, but for this next generation that needs our critical support. And next slide. So what difference will $4.5 million make for the district moving forward? It allows us to maintain our current programming and services and to build a budget that is sustainable over time. And I think I hand this over to you, Mayor.
Couple more points, and then we'll open it up for questions. Obviously, the first thing all of us as residents think, or if you happen to be a landowner of some commercial property here, so what's it going to cost me? Go to newtonma.gov/override. You'll find this calculator. Just plug in your address, and you'll see exactly what it's going to cost you. I'm going to give you two examples. It's a little bit disconcerting right now that the median value of an assessed home here in Newton is $1.2 million. Gulp. But for that household, in year one, when if the operating override passes, that would be an additional $290 that year. As I mentioned earlier, the debt exclusion payments, the bond payments for Countryside and Franklin get feathered in. They don't even start for 2 years, the first 2 fiscal years, and then they get feathered in. By 7 years from now, the full amount will be showing up on your tax bill. For a house valued at $1.2 million, that's an additional $183. So you have to add the two together. Let's look at a home valued at $750,000. Immediately, you'd see an extra $173 on your tax bill. 6 years later, 7 years later, it's an additional $110. Let's go to the next slide. I know that for some people, particularly on very tight incomes or fixed incomes, just the notion of any increase in taxes is just leads to sleepless nights. Please know we've got 9 tax assistance programs in the city. I have forwarded the paperwork going forward to double the assistance that's available in 7 of them, and for the other 2, expanding them significantly. Please, everybody, regardless of the override, go check this out and see if you qualify. It's particularly for people who are older residents, disabled, or veterans. And then let me lift up something that Kathy Smith talked about. Here in Newton, 20 years ago, there was an override, and then 10 years ago, there was an override. And this is the time, every decade, we run out of runway where the cost increases. It's particularly apparent right now in this very inflationary period, but even before that, where costs just keep accelerating. The other thing that happens is new initiatives. We are doing in the Newton Public Schools so much more than we were doing in 2013, or if you go back to 2002. The type of specialist supports, the bringing all types of students back home who used to be placed out of district, the technology. Somebody's going to have to track down this data for me. So when did we even start putting technology into the operating budget of the Newton Public Schools at all? For so many years, it was funded by parents through the PTOs. And even within the last couple of years, PTOs were still funding technology. We have both expanded the use of devices and appropriately brought those costs in-house as they should be. So we've only passed 2 overrides since the year 2000. Look at Brookline at 7, Lexington at 9, Needham and Wellesley both at 16. Let me just close with saying, our most core value here in Newton is about education. It's about children. It's about believing in having fabulous educators in these buildings. And yes, also upgrading our buildings over time. I am so proud to be the mayor of a community where that's the heart and soul of our community. I've had the pleasure for 5 years of going to almost every single school committee meeting. There is amazing work going on. And yes, we will continue to try to do better to achieve those 3 goals of academic excellence and social and emotional well-being and educational equity, as Mark talked about as he led us off. We're always trying to do better, and we will do better, and we know we need to do better, but it also requires the funding for us to be able to deliver on the promise of Newton. With that, I'm opening it up. Is there a question from anybody here in person? Okay, come, say it out loud. We'll repeat it. We'll repeat it. I'll just listen to you and repeat it back to everybody so it can be on. Nope. Why don't you just say it and then I'll repeat it back.
Okay. So my name is Adam, and I'm a long
Hi, Adam.
Newton resident.
Actually, I think we'd rather do it this way if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. And I have children at Franklin.
Lucky
Principal.
you.
Thank you so much for everything you do for our children. Phenomenal principal. My question is really about why we're asking for an override at all. I support, it's obvious that we need to work on this building. We've known about that for many years. When I look at the math, we've increased, after correcting for inflation, we've increased the spending in Newton by 30% per capita over the last 10 years. And under your leadership, we've increased the nominal spending by 22% in 5 budgets. That's 4.4% a year, well in excess of the 3.5% that we're increasing the school budget. We just had ARPA funds of $64 million. We knew that we were going to have to do work on this building. So it's a mystery to me why we would be asking, why we didn't plan for some of those ARPA dollars to be spent on the debt override. And on the primary override, my question to you is why are we unable to balance the budget?
Fabulous question, Adam. Thank you. And let me see if I can repeat it back and get it kind of right. No, but it's a really great question. So I think Adam is saying we've been increasing the budgets and taxes over time, and we've known about buildings like Franklin or Countryside for years. It's clear that we need to do this. And I'll add one more thing that Adam didn't say, which is also our enrollment is declining. So why the heck do you need more money? Have we been mismanaging the city? And plus we had ARPA funds of $63.5 million. So when you take that whole stew together, it doesn't make sense to you why we're going to the voters and saying, dig deeper in your wallets. Shouldn't we have been able to do all this good work? Let me begin with a few answers or responses. I don't know if there'll be answers, but then I'll also open it up to other people on our teams and see what they might add. A few things. We got amazing $63.5 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds. We call it the nickname of ARPA. The Franklin School alone will be $61 million. So the 63.5 seems huge. Our needs are even huger. We also used the ARPA funds to help with the design of not only Countryside, Franklin, and Horace Mann to get us going. We are moving forward. In January, we'll be opening a completely renovated building for our youngest learners, the Newton Early Childhood Program. We're also well on our way with the new Lincoln Elliott. That will be your current tax dollars at work. If we're going to do, and we're planning, as we should, a facility for our oldest residents, a new senior center, again, our current tax dollars at work. We run out of debt service capacity. That's why in the 2013 override, that paid for Ainger Service and Cabot. It's no surprise that 10 years later, to do even more buildings, we're planning on, with help from our voters, help from our taxpayers, doing 3 more schools with help. Couldn't do it otherwise. They will be pushed way off. The other thing I would just say, yep, enrollment's shrinking, our budget is going up, and the needs of our students are going up even faster. This was true, and again, I'll let the educators talk more about this. This was true pre-pandemic, and then it accelerated during the pandemic and became more obvious to all of us. Both, we care so deeply. How many kids do you have, Adam? Your 3 kids, and they're all here at Franklin right now? So you've got 2. So you've got years ahead. You've got at least 10 more years, I'm guessing, to make sure that your kids, I'm guessing you have 3 different kind of kids, that some of them are going to be in debate, others are going to maybe need a little extra help with math along the way, others are going to be in a theater program, some, maybe one of them's a STEM kid, and whether it's art or chemistry or whatever it is, for each of your 3 kids to make sure we've got the breadth and depth and excellence of programs. It just simply, we've outpaced the cost of providing those fabulous services, and we've expanded what we're providing for all our kids. Let me stop there and see who else wants to add on. I'm going to hand it over to Liam Hurley, who's both our operations and finance person over at the Newton Public Schools.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Liam Hurley. I actually happen to be a Needham resident, wondering why after looking at that slide I'm in there, why I'm not in Newton. But, I think Kathy really spoke. I'm not sure if your direction was really kind of more towards the mayor on the school side in terms of what we were looking at, Adam, in terms of why are we struggling on that piece?
My question is, our budget has increased dramatically. It's outpacing inflation. It's outpacing the growth of the schools, the 3.5. And so my question is, why do we need more?
I think the mayor did a nice job in terms of answering that. Maybe a question actually possibly for Maureen if she wants to get into that. I will just tell you, and I was just taking a look at it until my iPad just died. Certainly on the ARPA side, the city has done a really nice job for the school department the last couple of years. I had a chart that I was just looking at. We're presenting our fiscal report to the school committee. This past year in FY22, almost $7 million of support, and that helped with all sorts of things. HVAC products, there was a recognition stipend, there was a payment for technology of almost $1 million. So on the school side, the school has been benefiting from that use of ARPA money, and I think they've been very, very mindful of trying to use the ESSER money really for one-time expenses on their end. So I think that, I commend them for doing that. On the school side, I think this, we've been trying obviously to stay within our means. I think the slide that Kathy put up that we talked about was basically our rising costs. We can get into that more deeply, and basically the use this kind of reliance on one-time funds. But Maureen, I don't know if you have if you want to chime into that. I think it's really the mayor's response is the best. Right. Okay.
Other questions? Anybody want to build on Adam's? Mike.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for the presentation. So, for those of you who don't know me, I have a son who's 5th grade and here at Franklin. And then my daughter went to Franklin from 1st grade. We moved from Boston. And she's now in 8th grade. And I do remember coming here, having heard such wonderful stories. We came from a turnaround school in Boston, at Jamaica Plain, and came here and was so excited about the school and stepped in the door. It's just like, oh my goodness. That turnaround school is looking from a physical plant point of view, first perception. Like, wow, did we make a good decision? And then once my daughter was in, we realized how great a decision it was. But it's surprising to me that there were many things. For instance, one thing was we wanted to do an after-school program. And we basically found out we almost had to sign up when she was in the womb because of the limited capacity. But then now, looking back, we realize how many of the things that we faced that we viewed as just something we were doing to get our kids the best education we could were limited by the building. An education, after-school program that is so booked up because it's so small can't meet the needs of other people that are coming in. You know, the stress of finding out a week before whether you're in or out before the school starts about what to do is a huge cost on parents. We talk about money, and we know the burden of money on not just older people, but to earner families who moved here to make things work for their family because they knew the right thing, a little bit like us. But, you know, things happen. They're surprised. They have to do the improv that all of us have done in the last 3 years. But what can we give them that is value, and how can we talk about value for a great new park that they can go to instead of having to drive to a recreational area? Safe sidewalks and streets so they feel that more people can feel they can walk with their kids can walk independently so they don't have to take the time to drive them. That's part of the override as well. You know, a great place where we're teaching in a way that they're not thinking, do I need to do after-school programs for Russian math or something like that? Because it's here and it's offered. We can offer excellence and less stress and time, more predictability to be a great school. Or even say, you don't have to make the decision of going to a private school, which a lot of parents have the means here, but that divides us because many parents don't have that need. If our schools do that, what do we offer? What's the value? And a lot of people say, well, can Newton provide that or not? You can't provide it when the building can't support it. And so that has to be the standard. A lot of people talk that change, you know, things have changed so much, but as you said, it's the bedrock of Newton's life is that their schools provide in this way. So how do we talk about that value? And then, just the other question about you talked about all the programs to help like the elderly and people who have fixed incomes. But we know that there are maybe more people in that group that in the population or residents that have needs. And how are you thinking about addressing those, even if we can't give them an exemption or something like that? How do we help those people?
So let's see if I can encapsulate what Mike has said. He said his family moved to Newton in large part, like so many others, because he was a parent and he was moving to Newton to find a fabulous community as well as a school system. And his kids, he's very glad to be part of the Franklin Isum Day community. But when he walked in the door here at Franklin, his heart stopped and he kind of was questioning whether he'd made the right decision. It's all turned out very well despite this building because of fabulous educators and even the tiny amount of space that could be allocated in this building that's so tight for after-school programming. Thankfully, it's working, but he can imagine what it will be once Mark Chitty and the team here has the right space with the right adjacencies, and just how much that will support the educators who are here every day, as well as the generations of kids that will be coming through. So how do we talk about that? I'd also just say Mike talked about how many other elements of the override, while not officially about schools, are about kids. So making it safer and better to bike or walk to school, or have a playground nearby that's in tip-top condition, or an athletic field that is better maintained for our wee little ones to our athletes on the varsity teams in our high schools. So there's lots to do, and I think Mike asked just, so how do we talk about the value of that? And I actually see it every day. Even as Adam is questioning, why the heck can't we do all that within our current budget? I would say people here in Newton, like Mike and like Adam, want just a wonderful community and education for their kids, and understand that we're living, just as each of you are living, in difficult economic times. Liam's team and Maureen's team are facing that same inflationary pressure and staffing shortages and supply chain issues, as Josh is trying to finish up the NECP building and get New Lincoln Elliott launched. Yep, we've kept increasing the budget all along the way. He could talk about the inflationary pressures. And Aisha can tell you the struggles she has when she's trying to say, boy, if we only could have one more of this specialist in that location, it would be better for the kids. We would be doing a better job. And she's always challenged by just, so how many people can we afford to have on the payroll? This is just a critical moment. And Mike, we try to, anybody here in the city of Newton who is facing, whether it's social and emotional and mental health challenges or financial challenges, please reach out to us. We've got a great human services team at City Hall who are very professional, very caring, and have great avenues for support and help. Don't think twice about picking up the phone and just saying, can I talk to you about something I'm facing? We're here to help. And Aisha's going to follow up.
Not to that question. If it's okay, I wanted to come back to one aspect of your question, Adam, that had to do with enrollment. And one part that I know better than some of the other parts, because in this role, looking at particularly elementary enrollment where we see the greatest decline. And I think it's really important to highlight. I wish I had some visuals today, so for me, in my mind, I'm thinking about the future with every forum, what kinds of things and what ways can we represent information to help people understand some of the school side pieces of things. One of the things that I think is important to know, first of all, I'm going to look at Liam when I say the vast majority of the school department budget is in salaries, right? It's in personnel. What's the percentage, Liam?
Approximately 89% is salaries and benefits of our entire
So
budget.
then you think about, like, who are the people in the Newton Public Schools? Like, and if enrollment has dropped, why do we have so many people? And I think that's one of the questions. And I think it's really important to understand a couple of different things. One is that our commitment to neighborhood schools results in some inefficiencies. So places where we're maintaining average class sizes of 20, for example, in a neighborhood school. So let's imagine you have a school with a three-section school that has 60 students. You're going to have 3 classes of 20, 20, 20. In another neighborhood with smaller enrollment, with 30, half the students, you have 2 classes of 15. Could we absorb more students in that school? We could. If you reduce a student or two, and I have a slide from last year that was helpful in terms of looking at how because of the commitment to our neighborhood schools, fluctuations in enrollment do not necessarily result in an accompanying addition or subtraction of staff. There was another point I wanted to make about that. So that's one piece of things that I think is important to note. The other piece is that those declines in enrollment don't happen all in one chunk. They happen, we have 15 elementary schools. They're distributed across 15 elementary schools across 6 grades each. And so when you say it's 2 students in this grade and 3 students in this grade, it's scattered in a way that sometimes results in a staffing change that we can make. But sometimes that's more cumulative. And then changes in, even if I think about, this is my 2nd year in this role. I was a principal in the district. This is my 10th year in the district. I was a principal prior. But last year, the last 2 summers, watching the enrollment carefully to see where might we have a reduction. And in fact, Franklin was one of those schools this year. Our projected enrollment for kindergarten did not come in. And at the last minute, I was talking to Mr. Chitty about needing to reduce a classroom here. That classroom teacher, though, needed to be moved elsewhere to another school that had an unexpected rise that needed to add a position there. And so keeping a close eye on those staffing positions means that, and the commitment to neighborhood schools and the spread of those reductions in enrollment doesn't always result in accompanying decline in those classroom teachers in particular. The other thing I want to highlight, there's a couple of other things I want to highlight. Over 40 FTEs were added in aides when we went to full-time kindergarten. Full-time kindergarten was an investment. This community wanted and needed to have a full-time kindergarten program, and anyone who spent time in a classroom full of 5-year-olds knows that they need a level of attention and support to make that program successful. And so part of investing in that program meant an addition of FTEs that contributes to the overall FTEs that you see in the Newton Public School. At the same time, in the override, as you saw, I started in this district in 2013 and was thrilled to be a part of looking at the ways that we added positions like interventionists and supports to be able to support our students, providing just-in-time support to be able to address their learning needs. Part of our, rather than waiting for that gap to get wider and wider, some of the positions, some of the ways that we're thinking about, we're always learning and growing as professionals in the field of education, following the research, looking at what are the necessary positions to meet students' needs. That has resulted in changes in FTEs over time. That's about being, and in my mind, I see my job, right, is about representing, like studying the field of education, telling you what's right for kids. Like this is what the research says, this is what we're studying, this is what we know gets results, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and we're in the human growth work, right? Like there's an art and a science to this. And then making recommendations, and this community has supported that. That was part of what was supported and part of why you see some of those FTEs as a result. I hope I haven't rambled too long, but that's some of what came to mind in thinking about the FTE portion of things.
Can I just make one additional comment? So when you talk, and I'm talking to the taxpayers, to the community, one of the things that we do very well, and we need to do this, and you'll actually see this at our school committee meeting on Thursday evening, tomorrow evening, we do get enrollment reports. We share with the school committee feeder patterns. So we do take a look at ways to make sure that we are using those taxpayer dollars efficiently and, as Aisha said, in the best interest of our students, knowing what we know as to what helps them to certainly develop and the expectations that families have here. Whether you're a student that can accelerate, that's the expectation. Whether you're a student that needs that little bit more of extra support, that's the expectation. Whether that's students that, again, can go to school with their peers and still receive the services that they legally are required to receive. So I want the taxpayers to know we continually look for efficiencies, as Aisha said, looking down to getting close to the first day of school as we look at some of our registrations during the summer. So please tune in, watch the work that your school committee does, not only each and every day, but certainly at the meetings that are public, and we welcome your input and your observation of the work that we're doing.
Other questions tonight? Sam, did anything come in over email?
No.
Not a thing that way. So maybe we're wrapping up. I'm very grateful to those of you who could come in person, to those of you who may have tuned in, to those of you who may see this on recording, please know we're right here for the next, we're guessing though, it's up to the Election Commission and the City Council to pick a date for this. We are expecting mid-March. We're available to answer more questions. Adam, if you want to follow up and have that be a one-on-one for 45 minutes, I'm in. Just email me. Happy to talk to anyone and everyone. There's a lot of questions and thoughts out there, and we'll try and share with you how we're thinking about things. Thank you all. Have a good evening.